Seedfolks, read aloud by Mrs. Carter. Today we will be reading Chapter 7, Curtis. Let's think about and answer the following questions as we read. How is Curtis changing? What was important to him in the past? What is important to him now? How does Curtis treat Royce, who's a new character we meet in this chapter? Most of the characters plant a vegetable that is important to them. Curtis plants tomatoes because they are important to Letitia. Why are they important to her? Then make sure you're looking out for different pieces of figurative language in this chapter. There are 3 idioms and 2 similes. Chapter 7, Curtis. Deltoids, awesome. Pecs, check 'em out. Quads, now playing on a body near you. Can't help being born with this body or living 3 doors down from Cap's gym. Can't stop people from calling me Atlas or Seps. Actually, I started that name, but that was before Letitia cut me loose. We had us a real nice thing going. She was a few years older than me, always talking about having a family, living in a house in the country like her aunt's place in Michigan. I wasn't really listening too hard. I was 23. With this body, I had other girls hanging on me at the same time. Some of them I just couldn't brush off. When Letitia found out, she slammed the door in my face so hard the paint cracked. You don't know what you got till it's gone. All that was 5 years ago. I've caught up with her now, done fooling around. She was looking for a husband, and now I'm looking for a wife. I moved back from Cincinnati in May and ran into her brother the first day. Said she's still single. Same 3rd floor apartment. But when I came up to her on the street, she turned her back. Wouldn't let me explain. Twice it happened. No chance for words, so I decided to give her some deeds instead. She lives across the street from the garden. I staked out a spot right by the sidewalk where she could look down and see it. Then I came home with 6 little tomato plants in plastic containers. She had a serious thing for tomatoes. She'd put a monster slice on a piece of bread and call it a sandwich. She'd even bite into them just like an apple. Always talking about eating them out of her aunt's garden when she was a kid and how she wanted to grow them someday. She probably thought I forgot all that. I planted them right there in front of her eyes to show her I hadn't. That I was waiting for her. I got the biggest beefsteak tomatoes. I could see them in my mind, bright as traffic lights, flashing at her across the street. I'd never grown anything before. I got into it. Every day something new. The first flower bud, then those first yellow flowers, then the tomatoes growing right behind them. This old man with no teeth and a straw hat showed us how to tie up the plants to stakes. Then someone else told me all their diseases. That got me worrying. What if my plant started wilting or caught blight and died? That wasn't any message I'd want her to see. I started coming straight from work to check them. I noticed every hole in every leaf. I picked off bugs, pulled out weeds, and I gave them lots of that fertilizer called tomato food, as somebody told me. From little green marbles, those tomatoes started growing. Then they started getting orange. Then they went to red. I kept looking up at Letitia's window, wanting her to see it too. The only faces looking back were the vagrants who hang out under her place. That liquor store's all boarded up, but they still suck on their bottles there anyway. They like to call me a sharecropper, ask how the crops are doing. I could have banged their heads together, but I didn't. That was part of the point of the tomatoes. I was showing Letitia that just 'cause I got muscles don't mean I'm some kind of beast. I stopped working out and stopped going out with no shirt, no matter how hot it was. When some chicks would be walking by and see me there say looking fine, I knew they meant me, but I'd point to my biggest tomato and say sure is. My homies all laughed to see me out there. Stopped calling me Sep, started calling me Tomato. I just smiled. Those tomatoes got as big as billiard balls. One day, when I checked them, my biggest one, the one I'd been watching the closest, was gone. The next day, another one was gone. It wasn't insects that took them. I was mad. They weren't even all the way ripe yet. My plants were right there by the sidewalk. I put chicken wire around them, and even on top. But people could still reach in if they tried. I couldn't guard them day and night. Then Royce showed up, just in time. You drop bread on the ground and birds come out of nowhere. Same with that garden. People just appeared. People you didn't know were there. Royce was like that, except that he didn't want anybody knowing he was there. One of the gardeners saw that her pile of grass clippings was all spread out, had sort of a human print in it. He'd been sleeping there nights and leaving early. One morning he slept late. I'm the one who found him. He was 15, built big, looked like I did, got into a fight with his father, and then looked thrown out. Seemed like it wasn't a place for him anyway. From the way his face looked, he didn't want to go back. I brought him breakfast and we made us a deal. I found him a place closer to my tomatoes, but hidden by somebody's corn, so that he wouldn't be seen. I brought him a brand new sleeping bag. I gave him money for food that week. Then I picked up a pitchfork for $3 at a junk shop. His part of the deal was that if he saw or heard anyone messing with my tomatoes, he'd come at him full speed holding the pitchfork. That was my best shot protecting him at night. For daytime, when Royce was gone, I painted a sign that said Letitia's Tomatoes. It was big. I put it right there in front of the plants facing the sidewalk. If people know something belongs to a person instead of the city or the U.S. government, they're more likely to leave it be. When I pounded it in, I filled up the water can. Walking back, I looked up at her window. As still as a cat, behind that lace curtain, there was her face, staring out down at the sign.